Hello and welcome to Candidate Forum 2023. My name is Tee Adeyemo and I'm presenting tonight a conversation, a political conversation between two tigers or titans, Brent and Donald. I'm going to let you introduce yourselves. We start with Brent.
Hi, I'm Brent Tyson. I'm the Alberta Party candidate for Edmonton Decore. Um, I've lived in North Edmonton for 30 years, in Decore for 20 years. Um, I'm a family law lawyer of 30 years. I work downtown. I work with a lot of people who need a leg up or the like. I do a lot of mediations. I'm also the president of the Edmonton Blue Crew. We umpire minor ball, and I'm the president of Elope Musical Theatre, who is the oldest musical theatre group in Edmonton.
Thank you very much, Brent. You're a very busy man. So to you, Donald.
Well, I already lose because Brent's got me beat. So, all right. My name's Don Slater. I'm with the Liberal Party of Alberta. I'm a disability advocate and former Boilermaker. My family arrived in Alberta in 1903 as bar settlers and helped establish the community of Lloydminster. My grandfather fought in World War I at the age of 16, and he rode with what's called the Sally Horse, the Southern Alberta Light Horse. Knew General Griesbach quite well. My family has served Edmonton and the community for 120 years now, and I'm just trying to follow in their footsteps. I care very much about the vulnerable, as does my fellow candidate Brent, and we're just here to try to help everybody that we can.
Thank you very much, Don. That was for our introduction. So the first question I have, I know the other candidates are not here, but we are just going to have a nice conversation. Is what would you be bringing to the table that the other candidates may or may not have? We'll start with Don.
Well, I think the fact that we're here suggests that we're more concerned about fighting for our community instead of fighting against each other. I think the other two candidates that aren't here are really engaged in a battle. And before we came on air, we were talking about battling for a position in government and how it's very divisive and tribalism is very bad for our community. Um, what I want is affordable housing. I want to see every vulnerable person taken care of. I want to see our social contract in society obeyed. The social contract allows people to gain great wealth as long as they provide for the most vulnerable. They're doing the first part really well, gaining the great wealth, but they're not doing the second part very well, which is providing for the vulnerable. And we've seen our vulnerable population really grow over the past couple of years. We see it at every intersection. There's a person standing there with a sign, and we see it in homeless camps. So I'm running just basically to help the vulnerable. That's my biggest concern. And I think everybody should be voting for a candidate based on their empathy and what's in their heart versus voting for party. But I do understand that people are very scared and they are voting against instead of voting for. I will say that's why we need a ranked voting system so people can once again vote for what they want instead of voting against what they desire. And that's pretty much the summary of that. So I'll let Brett take it away.
Thank you. Over to you, Brent.
Well, I mean, the Alberta Party is working very hard to get at least our seats back in the legislature. We had 3 of them before the pandemic, lost them in 2019. If we get 3 back this time, that would be great. As far as what we bring to the table that the others don't have, it's almost an endless story. Our platform's available on our website to have a look. But while the NDP has good policies going towards healthcare, we believe ours are better. Neither has a good handle on homelessness, the unhoused, how to get them housed. we think we have a great plan for that. Don mentioned ranked voting. We are definitely wanting to have a citizens group get together and see what sort of election reform we can get. This two-party system it's divisive, it's hateful. I don't know if anybody's been on social media when the last election occurred, but the NDP didn't stop with their nasty, nasty attacks on the UCP. The UCP fired back. The time before that, it was the UCP attacking the NDP to get power back, so to speak. And while they're fighting back and forth, nothing is getting done. Albertans need a third voice. They need a voice that relies on evidence and that the measures put in place are measurable. Whatever you're doing, you have to be able to measure it. Many of the initiatives are put the dollars in the top and hope they hit the right holes on the way down. We think targeted spending is the best way to go. So, I mean, like I say, I could go on and on about how we're different, but yeah, you can grab that from our policy book and our platform on our website.
Right, thank you. So that was for our introduction. So let's start with homelessness. Just before we started, you were talking about homelessness. So we start with Brent. In Edmonton here, it is a huge problem. Do you think it will ever go away? What is your party going to do to change that narrative to solve that problem?
So, like any other society, the issue of unhoused people will never completely go away. But what I'm looking at and what our party's looking at, if you live in the north area of Edmonton along 153rd Avenue, there is the ATCO Veterans Village, and that is put up by an organization, a not-for-profit called Homes for Heroes, who install these little communities all across the country, all across Canada, wherever unhoused veterans are with mental health issues or addiction issues and the like, or if they just down on their luck fall out of a job and lose their house and all of that sort of stuff. So this is the model that we're looking at, and we're confident that it can be absolutely implemented across Alberta. The country of Finland uses that particular type of model to deal with their homeless, and we're following that. And I'll tell you a couple of statistics in Finland. They were able to put 4 out of 5 people in homes, and of those people, 4 out of 5 actually dealt with their issue, whatever it might have been, became productive, got a job, and were self-sustaining. And so at the end of the day, you've got a taxpayer instead of someone you need to support. So in that sense, it's positive, and it's also positive for the individual. On the other side of it, we have the unhoused people in Edmonton, and we've all seen them. And Danielle Smith and the UCP wants to put the boots on the ground to them. I don't think that's the solution. She wants to put them into mandatory treatment. I don't know if you've ever tried to make a smoker quit smoking, but that doesn't work, and we all know it doesn't work. But if we get into these kind of situations where we can build that kind of a community, like the ATCO's Veterans Village, we take people off the street. They have a safe place. They have dignity. They can have a shower. They have a place where they can keep their things. If we give them supports and we give them psychological supports and addiction supports, and if they want them, they can take their time to use them. We're not going to throw them on them, but at the end of the day, what happens? but much fewer ambulance visits, much fewer police attendances, much fewer attendances at the ER, and the list goes on. So at the end of the day, even though you have to throw the money into putting these little villages in place, it saves money. Finland proved it, and there's no reason why we can't do it here.
Thank you, Brent. Don, what are your thoughts?
Well, there is Brent is absolutely right. There is a tendency to punish the poor for being poor. When you want to hire police to shove them aside, this is definitely the wrong thing to do. Just caring for people is really the most important thing. Ed Stelmach did a secretariat on homelessness in 2014, I believe it was, and he found that it cost $116,000 per year to keep a mentally ill homeless person on the street. Hospital visits, policing, and everything else a homeless person requires ends up costing society a lot more than just trying to help redeem the person. We all know the saying, a society is judged by how it takes care of its most vulnerable. But that really means that if you let the bottom fall, then everybody else starts to fall from the bottom up. The middle class goes, and then everybody else starts to go too. If we look at the vulnerable as the roots of the tree, we all know we have to take care of the good roots to keep the tree healthy. So this is a major problem. The other issue is that in the last few years, and especially in the last decade, Wall Street has decided to invest in housing as a source of income. Corporatizing rentals is a really bad idea because now you've created a shortage of housing with no desire to increase the supply. Keeping the supplies down causes rental rates to go up. You make incredible profits off the shortages, and you don't have to take care of your properties. You can leave people in very badly maintained properties if there's a shortage because people have to take what's available. So short term, we have to give people a little bit more money through subsidies, but in the long term, we've got to build co-ops, socialized housing. It almost has to be a military style buildup of housing to remedy the problems. Inflation isn't going to stop until we address the root causes of the inflation. And in the housing market, the root cause is corporate investors. We got to stop that, and we just have to build socialized housing. That's it for what I have to say. So, sorry, I'm having a little bit of feedback here, so I keep stuttering a little bit. So, it's my end that's doing that. I'm trying to adjust that. I might remove one earpiece so I can hear better. Sorry about that.
That's okay. We're hearing you. Okay, so I appreciate your thoughts on homelessness. We get to the second question, starting with Brent first. And there's a lot of clamor about oversized classrooms. A lot of clamor about no teaching assistants. Children in schools who need teaching assistants, teaching aides, don't get that. Let's start with Brent, shall we? What are the promises your party is making to help children in school? Mhm.
Well, what I want to tell you first off is it doesn't start at school. It has to start before school. It has to start in specialized daycares. First off, where we can identify children who have challenges that need to be addressed. We have to have qualified childcare providers in those daycares, and we have to promote their education. Once we get to school-age children, each classroom requires, or not each classroom, but where it's requires the right number of teachers' aides to deal with these children. I shouldn't say deal with them, but to work with these children in order to assist them along. So it's not like we need TAs in every single school. The issue is, and I don't want to segregate children, and we don't want to do that, but we're better putting challenged children in classrooms with abled children, for lack of a better term, and increased a number in those classrooms. But as far as class sizes goes, after that, we will use the caps that were going to be put into place just before the Kenney government took power and scrapped years of work of nonpartisan curriculum, which capped class sizes and dealt with the curriculum in a way that it should be dealt with educational professionals who are drafting it, not with any sort of partisan lean. As they're going through the school, they have to have their social supports within the school so that children can develop at a better pace and to deal with the issues or learn to live with the issues or deal with those issues. I don't know, it's tough to describe. This is not my bailiwick, right? And one of the other party members was education. So I'm just trying to mimic her in this. So in any event, at the end of the day, we hope that the children are well developed and also it's a preventative measure on the homeless issue. If we can get children through the school system with the proper supports, then we end up with less people who fall through the cracks at the end of the road.
All right. That's brilliant. Thank you, Brent. Don?
Again, it goes back to affordability. We have a form of capitalism that's extracting everything from our society, and socialism is becoming a dirty word. And I've always thought that capitalism has some very sharp edges on it, and socialism softens those edges. I know my dad was a bus driver, and on a bus driver salary, he raised a family of 5. Education back then was great. I was in a small classroom. And I think the biggest problem we're facing is the extraction of value from our society and the money we gain from our resources, and taxation is often sent out of province through the way that capitalism is working. Of course, classrooms have to be smaller, and we have to invest our money at the beginning of a child's life, at the beginning of a child's education. If we don't, the costs are much greater later. If we don't spend $8,000 a year raising a good child, we might spend $80,000 a year incarcerating that child when they turn into an adult. Everybody has to have an opportunity to be productive. We must avoid segregating people economically based on where they're from. And so, I can't overstate this, that empathy has to be at the start of everything. And we can't reduce what we spend on people based on capitalist principles. We have to add the humanity into the equation and realize that we all have to come together. It takes a village to raise a child. And that would be my closing statement on that. Well, I think we all feel the crush of the world and how much harder it's getting. And we have to address the issues that are causing that crush to occur. We have to say, every human being in our society has value, and they deserve a fair shot at life, and they deserve, to have things instead of having to lease things in life. So that all goes into education and all other systems as well.
And if I might, Tee, Don has reminded me of a few tweets I put out there just after my nomination, and speaking to a health economist who said a thing I'll always remember. It's much easier to raise a healthy child than it is to fix a broken adult.
Mm.
So.
That's
much more eloquently said than I did. So, bravo.
Good, gentlemen. So we start with Dawn. So this question looks at social justice, and you are a disability. How did you describe it? A
Disability advocate.
Disability advocate. Could you describe what your plan or commitment or promises will be to ensure equity for can I say disabled people? Is that
No, that's fine.
is that okay? Is that offensive?
There are people that are offended by words, but all words gather gnats, and so I'm not offended.
The right term to use
Well,
would
you could say persons with disabilities, but
persons
disabled people is fine. I'm not person first
with
language,
persons with disability.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I'm not. My main function isn't to battle over what words to use, but to gain equality for people that are,
I prefer,
suffering.
I just
Uh,
don't want to turn off anyone listening. If
yeah,
the
I
link
understand.
should be right, I don't want to come across as rude or offensive.
Oh
So
no, and that's wonderful. Words should be accepted as they're intended, not as they're interpreted.
that is true. It
You
takes
know,
witness as well a majority to
yeah.
be able to see that. So how would you ensure equity for
Well,
yeah.
Alberta has actually done a pretty good job with AISH. They've provided quite a bit. AISH is better than any other program in Canada. We heard Jason Kenney say it's the most generous. Well, no, it's actually the least cheap, because as long as you have people in poverty, you haven't quite measured up to the standards that you should achieve. You should shoot for. The UN sort of has demanded that in their charter that disabled people aren't left in poverty. And to that end, the federal government has now got something called Bill C-22 making its way through the House currently. It's almost finished. And what that act will do is it'll ensure that disabled people do not live in poverty. And removing a person from poverty is the first step to helping them achieve. When a person's in poverty, they're always struggling just to exist where they are. Subsidies and benefit programs when you're in poverty are like a ceiling, and when you're out of poverty, they're more like a launching pad. So, the first thing to do is to ensure that people aren't in poverty. So you do your best to make sure they're not in poverty. Again, I'll go back to affordability is everything. You can reduce poverty two ways. You can give people more money, or you can reduce their costs. And I personally believe in reducing costs, because if you don't address that, then money is just passing through hands on the way from the government to the very rich, from the government to the people that own things, and the disabled just become a vessel where the government prints the money. The disabled have the money for a few moments, and then it goes into the hands of the very rich. So equality starts with reducing costs, increasing benefits, and ensuring that people aren't in poverty.
Sorry, could the full question was how do you ensure how do you give equity to persons with disability, Black people, veterans, seniors? Could you deal with the whole range? Is that possible?
Was
Possible?
that was
Person
that for me?
with disability? Yeah, that was it.
Well,
That was meant to have been the whole question.
oh, okay. Well, the Supreme Court in Section 15 of the Charter protects people that are minorities, visible minorities, other minorities like disabled people, religious, gender. It protects people from discrimination, and it helps them achieve equality. It's called substantive equality. It's not about treating everybody the same. It's about achieving the same result for each person. It's sort of like if you have a tall person looking over a fence and a short person trying to look over the fence. Giving them both the same size ladder doesn't help the very short person. You have to give the very short person a little more help to reach that substantive equality. So generating equality is about understanding a person's individual needs, what they have to achieve their equality. And mostly it's about not tripping a person up. It's about not subjugating them. It's about not dividing them from the rest of society. You want to give everybody an equal chance to achieve. So that's really the answer to that question. I hope that's a good answer to that question.
Yes,
I'm sure
you did.
Brent will do better than I did. He keeps
Oh
showing
my.
me up. He keeps showing me up. I'm so hurt.
So let me rephrase that question maybe in a better way. How do you ensure that equity seeking people, persons with disability, Black people, veterans, seniors, LGBTQ are looked after in the society generally?
That's a very good question, and oh my. So what we're really talking about is EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And Don touched on, I think we've all seen the photograph of the three people of three different heights, and they want to watch a ball game, and they can't, they can't use the same size box to stand on. So they have to recognize that people have uh, limitations, but we have to look at people who are living with disabilities, that they have that disability, and work around them to provide the environment that will allow them to function as well as an abled person. What I can tell you about myself is that I have introduced and implemented EDI programs in two theater companies, the one I'm currently president of and one that I was with before, and my umpire association. And so from an organizational point of view and looking at EDI, one of the first things that we look at, and it can be broad stroke to include people living with disabilities, but it's the concept of anti-racism. For my theater companies, when we have an audition, we send out the audition notice to every cultural artistic group that we know of in the city of Edmonton, and we invite everybody to come and audition. In my umpire group, we have provided the umpires for the Alberta Indigenous Games for a number of years, but I got together, I put a proposal to the director of softball and said, why don't we come out and do a clinic and educate some of your band members to become umpires, and then we can work with them to develop them, and then possibly your games can not only have Indigenous participants, but a full contingent of additional Indigenous officials. So even though I'm kind of talking myself out of a job, they took the bait, and we actually sent people out there this year and certified 10 umpires for them to start with. So that's kind of where I'm at from a private point of view, and I'm sorry I'm stealing all the air out of the room. I thought about this on a governmental side. What can government do to deal with this? And we can certainly run education campaigns the same way the Stop Smoking campaigns went and everything else. So we can run educational campaigns. We can encourage people to take the appropriate education that's out there for them. I've taken the path, and I've done the University of Alberta Indigenous course on cultural competency. We can legislate in the area of not-for-profits, like I was working in, and legislate. They have to submit bylaws, and they have rules. They should have to submit their EDI policy. On the private side of it, on the business side of it, we can change the occupational health and safety legislation to mandate that companies must have an EDI program of sorts. So those are the kind of spitballing ideas I've thought of. And I guess I'll just leave that one there.
Okay, so
It was very nice of Brent to mention the baseball game with the guys standing on the boxes, because I created that meme about 10 years ago.
Awesome.
For explaining the disabled community. So that's sort of funny that you happen to mention that one. But, one of the things that I realized that answering this question is that my shirt is about the same shade as my face. So I can't really address the issues of being a minority well, except for being part of the disabled minority. So the best thing that I can do is just really, really listen to people from other cultures and find out the problems that they're facing each day, and trying to address each person individually, and hoping that the laws that are already there and established filter down through the rest of society, and people start listening to what's already being established. I think there's many laws and many committees that have been established to try to make things better, but it's just taking too much time for things to step forward.
Mm.
I just found the first thing that Don and I disagree on.
Uh-oh.
I recognize my privilege,
Yeah.
and that's what drives me. I
Mhm.
recognize that when I go into a store, nobody's looking at me.
Yeah.
But if two young persons of color come in
Mhm.
behind me, the clerk is watching them.
Mhm.
Mm.
That's distressing,
Yeah.
and it's up to us, the people who are privileged in society, um, to stand up. And it's us. If we stand up, then our friends, family, and everybody else will stand up, and that's when we start moving forward. Um, you can't let someone call somebody some kind of a slur without saying. You have to say something. You can't cower and say, "Gee, that was awkward." No, you have to say something, and until we start saying something, nothing's going to change.
Mm.
That's my thought on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
The only. Oh,
let me
sorry.
just ask you this, Brent
Yeah.
and Don. This is interesting because I'm talking to middle-aged white men about, and we're moving into anti-racism, and
Mhm.
I want to get the conversation away from hope to what would your commitments look like in terms of anti-racism.
Yeah. Well, I do understand privilege as well, but as a disabled person, I can say I don't understand what it's like not to be able to walk by sitting in a wheelchair. I can see the experiences somebody else is going through, but I really truly can't understand their experience unless I'm in their skin.
Mm.
And yes, it's very important to recognize what other people are going through, but I think you always have to listen. Until you've been there, you can't really answer it. You can have a ton of empathy, and your empathy can say I understand and I sympathize, but still you're only tasting off a person's plate. You're not eating their whole meal. Does that make sense? Is that a good meme? You can't experience a whole person's life and all their struggles by looking from the outside. And I think somebody like Brent has a lot of empathy and he's driven to make things better for people. I'm just saying that I can't know what it's like. I can only empathize, and I can only do my best for others based on my personal empathy and the desire to make everyone equal.
All right. Thank you,
And
Brent.
okay.
Um, I'm I, so from, and you're talking about from a what is my promise? What is
What
I'm
is your
going back
party
to.
promise or commitment to tackling racism? Does your party have an anti-racism policy? I know we talked about EDI, but this is a bit bigger than EDI. I think this should stand on its own as a policy, as a commitment, as a world look. How do we stamp whichever way it looks like Islamophobia, maybe, anti-racism?
We will definitely not tolerate those kinds of things. The human rights violations and the like are part of our policy in a broad stroke kind of way. We do not specifically have anti-racism policy yet, because it's a passion of mine, and that's something that I will always push. And I think my track record says exactly that. Uh, one thing I have to tell you about the Alberta Party is we do not have a party whip, so I can talk about anything I like as long as it doesn't directly violate a policy of the party. So I can go out on my own. I can go out on a limb and promote the idea of anti-racism. And as I said earlier, throw government dollars at it, throw education programs at it, throw advertising at it, promote legislative change. Maybe even tighten up. And I know we have, case law on hate crimes, and we know that's in the criminal code and those sorts of things. Um, tough for a province to change provisions of the criminal code, but we can certainly create provincial statute offenses, the way the provinces have done to take away the impaired driving charges of under the criminal code, to give the police an option. You can't say, we can't tell the police you have to use this legislation over this one. It's giving the police a tool, an extra tool in their toolkit to deal with certain situations, rather than having to abide by the strict burden of proof under the criminal code.
I think one of the other things that we have to work on is exposure between communities. I think fear is really what motivates racism. Behavioral immunity is something that the parties have used, especially Donald Trump. We heard Donald Trump's statement about the Mexicans, and I won't even repeat that statement. We're all familiar with it. And generating fear to gather votes is one of the worst things any party could do. Poverty breeds intolerance. Lack of education breeds intolerance. I think what is really most important is the communities come into contact with each other, because once you get to understand a person and like a person, the prejudices fall away. The more educated a person is in the life of another community, the more accepting they are of that community. So I think just talking to others, understanding others, enjoying their food, enjoying their culture is really a big thing.
Okay, thank you. We move on to healthcare. We know that money does not money does not actually reduce wait times. And if we've seen anything that the NDP has brought out today, it will be that they say they fixed the problem. The UCP has fixed the problem, but the problem is still there. It hasn't gone away. What is your party? What are you going to do in terms of reducing wait times? I don't know if there's a chance you guys will win the election, but let's just talk about your thoughts concerning healthcare. We start with, I think it's Brent, but maybe it's Dawn. Who would
I
like
think it's Dawn.
Oh,
Dawn?
thanks.
No, I'll
It's okay. I don't want to reveal too much of my personal issues, but I have cancer. And one of the reasons I have cancer is when COVID came along, there was a waiting time to get into the clinic for a blood test. And I had asked my doctor for a PSA test. And I went to the blood test clinic to get my blood tested, and they said, make an appointment. By the time I made an appointment, my doctor had given me a new form. And when I went in, it didn't have PSA on it. And so I didn't get tested. And so here I am. We heard Smith make comments about if you get cancer, it's your own fault because you didn't do the right things to prevent it. But so that leads me to believe that the best way to reduce healthcare costs is preventative healthcare, is to ensure that every person gets tested for every possible disease they might develop, which is likely. Like for men, it's all men should get a PSA test over the age of 50. We reduce costs that way by placing less demand on the healthcare system. We work with the government. Every person does their part to ensure their own health. Now, there's always going to be circumstances where a health issue escaped a person's control, like there was nothing they could do about it. But, we have to put the proper amount into healthcare, into preventative medicine, and allowing people to get into their doctors early, allowing them to get into treatment early. Because if you leave things, they just exacerbate and become much, much more expensive. So having nurse practitioners is a good idea, and having an adequate amount of doctors in the rural setting as well as in the cities is an excellent idea. Healthcare gets more expensive if you try cutting corners and you eliminate cancer trials, when you eliminate research, when you eliminate early treatment. You're saving money quarter to quarter, but you're not saving money in the long term. So it's very, very important that we look at this as a preventative issue. And that's all I got to say on that. Hopefully that was good enough.
Thank you. I'm sorry about your diagnosis, Don.
It's part of life. It's you know, we all go through our experiences in life, and it just it builds our empathy for others. You know, we can choose to curl up in a ball, or we can choose to make the best of a situation, and I think the latter is really the best way to go.
Mm.
So take that, Brent.
Ooh, my. A tough act
I
to
try.
follow.
I try to have a good sense of humor, and you know, care about my fellow man, because kindness is really the way to go. Like, how do I want to be remembered as I go forward? I'm hoping that they come up with a cure in the future. But really, being kind to others is the most important thing a person can do.
Mm.
Now I'll let Brent give you some more solutions to the
Uh,
issues at hand.
Okay, thanks.
So,
Yeah, no, Don, that's always tough. I picked up COVID. I was in the hospital last year
mhm,
for a pneumonia, and
yeah.
I actually got COVID while I was in the hospital for pneumonia.
Oh dear.
And now I'm a long COVID patient with exacerbated asthma with a bunch of
Hmm.
puffers and all kinds of garbage. So
Oh God.
I've had my failings with the healthcare system,
Hmm.
not to minimize your condition
Oh
at
no,
all.
you're not at all.
Um, but anyway, on the healthcare file, um, it's kind of interesting because our policy policies on healthcare have been uh, open and available for months and months. And strangely enough, both parties have taken from it, which is flattering, I guess. But anyway, I told you earlier that I had spoken to a health economist, had and I basically have him on speed dial too, because I've had a couple of sessions with him. You mentioned ER times. And I can talk about that issue. There's a much broader issue, but I can certainly talk about that issue. Don mentioned nurse practitioners. Yes, we need nurse practitioners in the ER. We also need psychiatrists and psychologists and mental health workers in the ER. Not everybody who presents at the ER needs to see a physician. Right now, every one of them sees a physician before that physician sends them off somewhere, finds out, oh, that's why you're here. You need to go this way. That logjam at admission needs to end. Uh, when we discover somebody has a boo-boo and they can go see the nurse practitioner, and I'm minimizing the ailment, but there are a number of ailments that a nurse practitioner can handle, that's where that patient should go. If a person is presenting on a mental health issue, then that's where they should go. That in and of itself, I am told, will cut down the ER wait times by 2/3, which is, I think, a pretty darn fine start. The other part is the ambulance people, that they wait with people in the hallway. I know because I had two ambulance trips to the hospital, once with the once with the pneumonia and once with the COVID, and both times that crew had to stay in the hallway with me until I could be handed off to a hospital person. So that it definitely has to be corrected.
Yeah.
I've got my own thoughts on that. So that's how we would address the logjam at the ER, addressing the healthcare workers and the lack thereof. We would, of course, open the number of seats. We were looking at lowering the entry requirements for nurses because the U of A has the highest requirements in the country, and we're not graduating enough people. We want to have an Indigenous program in both urban and rural settings, and also in the rural settings, we want to create incentives for doctors to stay there. So, Don mentioned the military earlier. There's definitely professional programs in the military where they pay for your education and you owe them time, like dentistry, right? And doctors, and you have to work for the military for 5 years. So we will provide incentives for the military, or not military, but the medical professionals of all stripes to work in the rural areas. And we will give opportunities to Indigenous people to work in their own communities in the rural areas. One of the other models we looked at was stop making doctors businessmen. They're not businessmen. They went to medical school to be a doctor. They get out, and all of a sudden they have an office where they have to bill the government and run an efficient practice and look after their staff and pay their rent and do all these things. That's like 95% of the doctors in the province. If we offered those doctors a staff job and provided them with staff and had a salary where they don't have to be a business person, and if they want, we're not going to thrust it on them, but if they wanted that avenue, that's another avenue where our economist tells us that we'll save large amounts of money and keep doctors where we need them, and where they have been basically running away. Look at all the ERs that are closing down in the rural areas. It's kind of sad. But our medical health platform is quite extensive, and I encourage anybody to go and have a look at it.
Brent mentioned something that he said the other political parties were borrowing from the Alberta Party's platform, and I must agree it is an excellent platform. And I hope that the people, when they get elected in government, don't say we have to stick with our plans, that they can look to other parties and take the suggestion of the other party. I'm hoping that the parties, if the election ends up being 44 to 43 or something like that, then the people of goodwill will start cooperating with each other instead of there being a tribal battle in the legislature. I hope that we can take all the best ideas. Mental health, I did skip over that. I missed it. I'm glad.
Done. We must start ending now.
Okay. Well, fine.
Your closing remarks. We must start
Okay.
your closing remarks. As you were starting,
Yeah.
over to you. Let's take closing
I'll
remarks.
just wrap it up. I'll say mental health is very important. And
Is
that's,
that all?
if you're running out of time.
What have I done?
Oh,
Oops.
we lost Don.
Okay.
There he is.
No, you've got about a minute and a half to do a proper closing argument. I just didn't want us to.
Okay. I just wanted to talk about healthcare. In Detroit, the Ford Hospital has a very low suicide rate because every person that comes in for every medical issue goes through a psychological test to see if they're suffering from depression. When they do that, they catch a lot of people that really need help. So yes, mental health is very, very, very important. If I'm going to make an in closing remark, all I'm going to say is that I hope the people that are elected will remember that their job is to take care of the vulnerable, not to battle the opposition party and stand there and yell it back and forth at each other. There's a lot of people in Alberta that need help. There's a lot of people that have leaned on my shoulder that are in tears, that need housing, they're scared for their future. These things have to be addressed. I am tired of being brokenhearted when I go to listen to vulnerable people and hear about their dire situations. I want those people helped, and I'm just hoping that all people that are elected will do their very best to ensure that the very least are taken care of.
Thank you, Don. Brent?
I first want to say thanks very much for having me on. I've really enjoyed myself. I really have. You're very thoughtful people. It's a pleasure to be here. Very disappointed that I'm going to call them the two binaries decided not to show up tonight, and particularly being members of the BIPOC community. They did not come here to talk about their communities, and Don and I are here helping and advocating for the communities that they should be advocating for. I'm saddened by that, but that's kind of the way it goes. For the Alberta Party, I really want us to get a leg in that legislature. I am such an underdog in Decore. against the other two, although I get calls every day. I get people calling me, asking me for signs, calling me, asking me issues. They're ecstatic that I'm the one that actually answers the phone on my brochures, and that they don't get called back by the other parties. I just want everybody to know that there is room for a third choice in the legislature. We would like to be that third choice. We believe we're a reasoned choice. We believe we're a cooperative, collaborative choice. We believe we're the right choice. And just please think of us on Monday or tomorrow.
All right. Gentlemen, I want to say thank you very much for honoring the invitation. Thank you for making the time. We have learned a lot. It's been a pleasure to meet you, Don and Brent, and I thank you again. I'm going to do a 30-second and then end the broadcast, but please feel free to leave at that time. Thank you again for your time tonight.
I'm actually hoping to chat for a few moments after the broadcast is done. So,
Okay, I'm going to end the broadcast and then we stay then. Okay.
Sure. Thank you.